Welcome to More Business, More Life. And today I have a special guest, Mr. Joe Baker, who is a Lenape Tribe elder. And what we're going to talk about today is things that I talk about all the time about how can we look back to live a better life today? How can we take what practices the Lenape people had around arts and music that can allow us to live an amazing life right now, and what you can take away today into your life in little pieces so that you can start being more in community, more with the people that matter to you, and live a better life. Let's jump into the conversation. Joe, it's beautiful having you here with me today. And as you know, this is the More Business, More Life show. And a lot of people come to me thinking I'm going to give them these business tricks, which I do have some things that work smarter.
Okay.
But the main thing for me in my heart is that we live more, because coming from immigrant family, we worked really hard, and I watched my grandfather and my father work so hard. And when I became a parent, I was saying, this is not okay. I want to be a part of my children's lives, not just financially. And so I chose to live differently and slow down. And that's why I wear this turtle pendant and other turtle artwork all around me. And then as I got to know the Lenape people, like the turtle is part of the origin story and all of this, but it's the essence of what I'd like to talk about today is that slowing down. Like, what can we look back to the ancestral line of the Lenape people, how they lived differently than we do today, so that we can live better going forward, right? So kind of look back to go forward. And because I think today, just to put the last piece on it, we're going so fast that we lose ourselves, and it's very convenient. It actually lines up with basically volunteer slavery that we lose our life.
Right.
So I guess, and this will be an open discussion, but I guess I'm curious, what are the first thoughts that come to you with all of your knowledge of your ancestors? How can we bring some of that to today? Is there some key thoughts?
Well, I think, first of all, we happen to be today in the ancestral territory of the Lenape. We're here in Manhattan, where the story begins, where first contact was made, first by the Dutch in 1609, followed by the British, and then the US. And that resulted in our genocide and forced removal from this original territory. So as a result of that, being on the run, running for your life, we had to leave certain aspects of ourself behind.
Okay.
We had to adapt and adjust through forced assimilation.
Yeah.
But what we never left, what we always kept, was our heart.
Yeah.
And within that heart is a certain peace. The Lenape are known among other tribes here in the Northeast as the grandfather tribe, known for their diplomacy and generosity.
Right.
And it's very, very hard in today's society, which is Western. It's been imposed upon us. We're a transactional, extractive sort of people, right?
Yeah.
We put the credit card in, we get the money out.
Yeah.
And that's not how indigenous people live and view the world.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to sort of straddle both zones of reality.
It's so drastic. The difference.
It's night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. So I think, what we have to do is we have to be conscious and work hard toward a reset on an individual basis, but also encourage that among our communities to reset, to come back to some kind of basic understanding that we are just one part of a life system. And there are those lives and living systems which are much older than we. And, I feel that I live very near Central Park, so I'm in the park a lot.
I would wondered how you could survive in the city without that.
That's right. That's right. And you know, when I'm there, those trees are witnesses.
Yeah.
They see us. And for you being in our sort of new Lenape territory, Indian Territory, Oklahoma, that part of Oklahoma, you're in the woods, that woodland area. Those trees are witness to you. Yeah. So are the rocks. They have memory. Yeah. And I feel that very strongly here. While everything has been altered and changed, there's still that spirit, Lenape spirit, that still permeates this land.
Well, in a way, too, and not to make a digression, but I think it's on point, is that this is a small window in the total time that your people were here, right? I mean, so, and if you think about it, this is so small compared to the thousands of years that was occupied.
Right.
So if you think about it, the root, wow, I just got tingles in my body saying that out loud. The roots are very deep, I guess.
Very
is what
deep,
I'm saying.
ancient.
Yes.
Ancient, back to the source, the beginning.
Yes.
The beginning of time.
Yeah.
And it's here. And that's something that can be destroyed. It can be altered. It can't be changed. It exists.
Yeah.
And we exist in relationship to those things. You know, this life is a relational life. And we have to remember that we, we have to respect all relations and care for all relations, because we are in relation to other things.
Right. Without those things, we wouldn't be able to start. Just like how we're drinking this cacao comes from a tree. If we didn't have that tree, we wouldn't have this beautiful beverage or so many other things that we eat and live and breathe. I think what just popped in my head, just for people that haven't studied this as much as I have, we were taught on purpose, right, that the people here that are indigenous, the Lenape people and the other tribes, that they were savages, animals living on the land, and that's not true. And the fact, even that I know from what I've learned from your dear friends like Michael Pace and others, the Lenape people, they weren't even really in teepees as most people think. They had built house. I mean, the reason I want to bring this up is because if we're going to talk about how can we take these lifestyles into our today, they might think, oh, what, you want me to go live under a tree, Steve? And, I know we may not all choose to do that today, but these people, before all of this colonialism, you were living in a society that is much different than portrayed in the history that we all learn, right? So maybe just speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think, in this country, for this population, there's a deficit of knowledge, true knowledge about Native people.
Yeah.
And we've been very much defined by Hollywood. And most people think of Native people as those people in the western or southwestern part of the U.S., because that's what's been popularized.
Right.
We people of the northeastern sector, the first to encounter contact, the first to be messed with.
Yeah, with all the big boats coming over.
Right.
Yes.
Are less known. And we know here on the island of Manhattan, there were over 26 village sites. So and what I want to emphasize about village is that those villages were in kinship with other villages. So there's this communal relationship, being in kinship with one another. That aspect, growing up in Oklahoma, I used to hear my family talk about kinfolk. And it wasn't until much later in my life I really understood the true meaning of that.
Yeah.
Jeanette Parks was our kinfolk. These people were part of our family, and they were our kin.
Yes.
And we were in kinship. So that kind of understanding, seems really absent today.
Yeah.
And living here in the city, if you're on the sidewalk, everyone is this. No one is looking ahead. No one is looking at where they happen to be.
Right.
Their whole life their existence is focused here.
Yeah.
And we miss so much. We have to learn to step away, put this aside,
Yeah.
and re-engage.
I agree with you. I think we've been taught to be disconnected. It goes in a
Well, I
line.
love what you said. It was like, it's sort of our enslavement, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then that works to the favor of a few people.
Yeah.
And so I keep coming back to it in this recent time. It's power over versus the power with. And all the historians that I've been around, and then I would even put you in that category because your wealth of knowledge, in this category. If you look at the duration of human existence, the amount of empiring is like this tiny. If you think about, we lived really well together, and you have a good life. Right. And I think these blips of empiring have come before and died, and it will again. I feel
we're in the moment of that.
Yes,
we're in that struggle right now.
We're done with this.
Steve, if you think about the Americas, I think about this all the time. This is not Europe. We are in the Americas, and the people who are in control, the people who have dominion over us, are in the minority. We people, the indigenous people of the Americas, are the majority of the population, and yet we are being controlled and directed by a minority population.
Right. And that's why one thing that I say, and I want your opinion on this, so I'm going to do as a statement and we'll bring it to a question. What I found in my heart and from some other of my great teachers is that, we tend to want to instantly push the darkness, right? So darkness is coming towards us, is not what we want. It is that power over. And then there's a natural tendency to want to push against it, to protest it in some way. And what I found is that gives more energy to the darkness. And instead, what I've been choosing to do is bring more light, shine more light, bring more together, know my neighbor, know my village, right? Come back, because that's the thing. There is, I'm going to mispronounce it, but I think it was the Travanock Institute. It was like the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were commissioned by some very wealthy people. And they said, how do we dumb down society? And the first thing they came back with, and all their says was, get everyone on international news and add a local, right? Because then you're distracted and you're looking at this thing way far from you that's not affecting your immediate day-to-day life. And then you disconnect from your people, right? And then that goes back to what you just said with the phone. Now I'm here, I'm like standing in Manhattan, where they're like, we could walk right by them. They're right here. We could touch each other, and they're not even connected to us.
Right.
By system. So I guess, how do we pull out? Or go ahead if you want to make a statement and then pull out of this.
Well, and also the other aspect of being correct or being right or being in balance is to take time for beauty.
Yeah.
To find that moment of beauty, which is all around us. There's a prayer in Lenape that speaks to that fact, and it's asking the Creator to open our hearts and our eyes to the beauty that surrounds us. And I think, that's very important for all people to pause and be aware that there are beautiful things which are just within reach.
Yeah.
They're not on the phone.
Yes.
There's beautiful imagery there.
Yeah.
But the real beauty is through other people and other connections and the natural world.
And that hits on a point, because that's another systematic thing, that if we're so busy, and we've been taught no pain, no gain. Right. You know that statement? Yeah, I bought that when I was a young man. I bought into that. I'm like, okay. And then you start seeking pain almost, right? Because, oh, I'm not going to get ahead if I'm not hurting myself, if I'm not working 18-hour days. In reality, that reduces our energy, that reduces our power and our consciousness. And then we're not looking at that beauty. Not that saying, right? Stop and smell the roses is like a
Yeah.
real thing. And
It's
that's again
real.
why I have this,
It's real.
the turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Steve, I do beadwork,
Okay.
and it's very time intensive. It requires a great deal of focus. And one of the great lessons I've learned in doing beadwork is the psychological lesson of the resistance I have to pick up the work and start that commitment of time. And I've been programmed to be busy, 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 busy. And there's all kinds of psychological games I play with myself when I start a piece. When I come back to beadwork, I've been away from it. You know, oh, I don't have time. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, what about that? Oh, I better make this call. All kinds of excuses that prevent me or, you know, prevent me from surrendering to this time, which is really a beautiful time, a time of self-reflection, a time of story, a time of sort of, it becomes a diary of experiences, you know.
Right.
But but our programming is such that there's great resistance to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it could be wasteful, or you could be doing something else.
Right.
But you bring the beauty, the art, and the time commitment to all of that is part of working less, right? Is that whatever you want to call work, like it because even you could call bead work. You said it, bead work. I just said it. It is work, but very intentional work, and then not just one thing, like going to an office or this or that. And so I guess, you know, I agree with you that we need to get that time back. And when I did it, just as an example, I thought I would make less money, and I'm a provider for my family, but I actually made more money, Joe, because if I forced myself to work less hours, I had to work smarter. I had to say, okay, well, what's the most important thing in here? Instead of letting myself, you said the word busy, I think we just let ourselves do all these hours, and we're not really that productive. If you force yourself to do something in 4 hours,
Right.
you're going to have to do the right thing.
Right.
And if you only have that 4 hours, and then you can move on. And what I found is all the fruit that you're talking about, all the beauty. I think, that's, I guess, if we go back to the heritage of the Lenape, that's a big part of it, right? Your art, your dance, your music.
Yes, yeah.
Right, which you have to come back to.
Yeah, to dance, to be in the moment, to be in communion, to be in relationship with others.
Yeah.
We recently opened Making Home at the Cooper Hewitt Museum of Art here in New York. And the Lenape Center was invited to do the Welcome to Territory installation. But what was really beautiful about the opening event is we brought tribal elders from Oklahoma, my community. Michael Pace was here, among others. We brought the drum, and we did the round dance in the garden.
Wow.
And that was such a powerful moment because hundreds of people got in that circle. They'd never done that before. And yet you were in relation to one another. You were moving as one.
Yes.
And you were moving to the heart of the drum.
Yeah.
And there's something so powerful about being in communion with sound and heart and spirit.
I feel that, and because I've experienced that, I get drawn in at a powwow. Like I could feel it's like the drum is letting our hearts beat in unison in some way. I guess coming to like a tactical thing in this, how someone that's listening to this or watching it, and they're in that mode that we're talking about. They're just on their phone. They're doing their thing. If you were, with all your whatever wisdom you could give, what would be like the starting point to start giving yourself because I guess it's a permission, which you and I really don't have to give people permission, but if you were, like, what would you suggest to someone that's just starting to give themselves time to embrace music or art or their community? How would you go about that?
I think you have to make that commitment. You have to, you know, talk to yourself, and you have to tell yourself that there's another way of being.
Yeah.
And then you have to go on that exploratory journey to find that other way. And that other way can be, you know, there's not one way of
Right.
being. There are many ways. But I think you have to make that commitment. You have to have that desire for another way of being. And then you have to find your own story.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it can come back to your beadwork. When you make that commitment, okay, I'm going to do it. And then, like, some of the work you showed me off camera here is that, and we'll get some shots, I know, but you spent a year making a piece.
Right.
So that's where, so it's just, I often say, plan your fun first. That's the thing I say, because once you plan that, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, or I'm going to do a day each week. You commit to that, then you basically have to fit your other parts of life around that activity. And it needs to be that way versus the opposite, right? I'll fit it in later. And then we get tired from work and we sit on the couch and then time goes by. So I think I'm just validating what you're saying. You commit to that. So you said that sometimes you hesitate. So are there anything inside that you could say that helps you get over that, right? When you're about to start a big piece?
I just have to stay with it.
Okay.
And I know it's, you know, I used to be a marathon runner.
Okay.
And I used to, there was that same kind of struggle initially until you hit that moment where you're, and I felt that with dance too, that you're flying, you know, and you're going to hit that space, that moment. You just have to stay with it. And I know that is true with beadwork.
Yeah.
And so I tell myself, okay, Joe, settle down, be calm, be quiet. You're going to get there.
Yeah.
And then magically you're in this other zone.
Yeah.
You know, you're in this place of being that is not part of the chaos and the noise of everyday life.
Yeah, I've often thought, and thank you for that, and I believe in what you're saying, and if you get over that hump, you can do it. And then it just is dawning, I've thought this in my mind previous, you know, do you think that the power over your people coming from those first colonizers, they saw how powerful you all were because you were with nature? Like, I mean, basically the spirit was so strong with your people, and they're so busy manning their ship to get here and then trying to create what they had over in Europe, that they saw how powerful you were.
Yes, I believe that to be true. And when they saw that, they also knew they would need to destroy that.
Yeah.
And that set in motion our forced removal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what contributed to our survival, I mean, just think about this. 5 different forced removals, up to as many as 14, all the way to Indian Territory, through generations.
Yeah.
Finally arriving 1867 in Washington County, now, what it's called now.
Yeah.
Indian Territory, later to become Oklahoma, 25 families, fewer than 900 survivors. And what it took to survive that was something that I don't think any of us can quite understand. But it was the beauty and the strength and the courage and the generosity of people being there for one another created the conditions that we would survive. And today, our tribal members have a responsibility to remember that and to respect that and to be in service for future generations, because that's how we continue.
Yes.
And it's our job, if you will, if we want to use that term. It's our responsibility to do all that we can do to create a foundation and a platform for the next generation so that they too can survive. And we carry this forward.
Yeah. It's quite amazing. And why you're here, I suppose, right? Because why would you choose to live in Manhattan other than be on your ancestral land and carries this forward as you are?
It's so Lenape Center was founded in 2009, and it happened, the moment of creation was here on the Upper East Side on 91st Street,
Okay.
on the sidewalk. One evening, when I said to my colleague, Adrian Kumans, we have to do something. We have to do something or we will forever be erased. And that was the seed of the beginning of Lenape Center. We didn't know how it was going to happen.
Right.
We didn't know how in the hell we were going to do any of this, but we just knew we had to do it. Because at that time, no one mentioned Lenape.
Yeah.
Was not top of mind by the public here. No,
Yeah.
you know, they're gone. They're vanished.
Yeah.
They're no longer here. And that's changed over this 15 years through our work. But it's something that had to be done, or we would forever be erased from our ancestral land.
Yeah. And I heard you on another podcast, you said there's 5 of you here. Is that still true? Or with Curtis moving, does that bring you down to 4?
It kind of, well, it actually brings us down to really, Curtis is in Oklahoma, Brett Michael Davis is in Wisconsin, Adrian and I are here. So we're down to 2.
Okay.
With Brent is focused on his music. He's in residence now here in New York. And Curtis is working on that agricultural program, bringing that back to our community, our tribe in Oklahoma.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're
that
all
puts
in
in perspective, though. Yes, you're all about bringing perspective to, and maybe just because we haven't said it on this, like what would you say the numbers were before this, I don't know, for lack of a better word, invasion came about?
The invasion.
Yeah. I mean,
The interruption.
The interruption. Yeah. What was the numbers of people estimated?
I've heard all kinds of different numbers. I don't really know how I can accurately give a figure to it, but it was a densely populated territory.
You're right.
Of connected villages and family sites.
Like you said, 26, and then they would have had their own, like this picture here, maybe, I don't know if we have that in the wide shot, but this is the ceremonial house that's in this piece of art that you did, right? And so each of the 26 would have had one of these, I suppose?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There may have been one for the area.
Oh.
That actually is the big house,
Okay.
the last big house, which was for our people northwest of Copan, Oklahoma,
Okay.
which was put away in the early 1920s.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so that's a very specific one. You know, it's not one that we're just imagining here in Manhattan. This is one where you grew up.
Yeah. This is really referencing Oklahoma.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
But there were houses. They probably would be different than this.
They would be different in that earlier period.
Right.
But the big house, the central religion of the Lenape people was here. It existed here in its true form.
Right. And so just to bring light to that, this is a system of trading and fellowship between each other to take care of each other. So we say trading, that wouldn't even have been a word, but it was probably just helping each other. But maybe there was a crop that did really well in a southern of these 26, or vice versa, and they would help each other out. A system of being together, which is a key word for me is, I
and
think,
caring,
right.
to be to be to care for family and extended family.
Yeah.
Growing up in Oklahoma, I remember as a kid Saturday night pitch games at my house where I grew up, and relatives would come for those games, and we kids would, hide under the table and listen to the gossip, which was great fun. We could stay up late. But when people came to the house, they always brought a gift. It could be really simple, like a pint of ice cream. But when you visited with someone, you always brought a gift. And, that's something that seems really kind of old fashioned today. I don't see it happening much, but it's kind of a very special thing
Yeah.
to bring. You brought gifts today.
Yeah, I always do. That's what my family taught me too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to get back to that. It's a expression of care.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing that will go back to bringing light. So coming to that whole, and I think it's like, if you think of, like a target symbol, right? It starts in the center. And I think sometimes we get too far out looking at the news or looking at our phones when we're on social media, and then we disconnect from what's right here in front of us, which is our community.
Yeah.
And I wonder your opinion on this, but that's my belief. I feel like we can make so many things better if we actually, put our phones down, stop worrying about the news, and we focus on our neighbor, we focus on our kin, we take care of one another.
And we just be in conversation. Let's have a conversation. Like, to converse with someone is becoming more and more rare,
Right.
in our culture today.
Right.
Let's text,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, I have friends, much younger friends, who, if I call their phones, they're not going to pick up.
Yeah.
They're not actually going to ever answer that phone.
Yeah.
They only communicate by text.
Right.
And text takes more time. I kind of like to hear a voice.
Yeah. Me too.
You know,
I
because-
gravitate towards that. That's why I picked up the phone with you.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
because
like,
there's a whole different perception of that individual, right? And that reality, you can hear the voice.
What I want to bring up, I got to spend time in South America a couple times, and one time I spent time with the Brazilian tribe, the Yawanawa people, and they don't understand fences. They can't even comprehend it.
A fence?
A fence.
Yeah.
Like they can't even,
Right.
and what they told me is that if someone's unwell in their village, they don't even, they all stop. They almost have like a party. It's not called a party, but they have a gathering until that person's well. So the whole village stops to make sure everyone comes together. And that's the key word of their tribe, together. And I might be missaying this, but I almost feel like Yawanawa means together. I think I was told that. Sorry if I'm off on that, but that's what I think when I hear their tribe. But and I think it comes back to this conversation. How much better will it be if we care, if we bring those gifts, if we notice what our neighbor needs, if we notice what our family needs, we're actually going to thrive. I call it turning more lights on. If we turn more lights on, the darkness will go away, right? What happens when you turn a light on? The darkness goes away.
Well, those are actions that we as individuals and collectively can take.
Yes.
And so it's worth a shot, right?
And then we just gather more, because then it goes back to the numbers that you said. We are the many. So if we start doing
We are the many. We are the majority.
yeah, that's it. So then I guess another, probably start to draw our conversation down. But if you're there in that, what would you say your first suggestion to connect again? Like if someone hasn't in a while, or maybe they're really short, or maybe they're texting and not calling, like what, is there something that comes to mind when you think of someone choosing to reconnect with the world?
Absolutely. Go outside.
Yeah.
Just go outside. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Go out and be in nature.
Yeah.
Hear the wind. Hear the leaves. Just be in nature. Let that be bathe in the beauty of the natural world.
And I found that to be so true. And being someone, I grew up in Silicon Valley, it's so fast.
Right.
It took me a while to get there, but I would say anyone, hearing Joe say that, just start. You just go for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, do an hour, see what happens. And, it's really interesting what you start to notice, when Michael Pace, who you grew up with, and he's become a dear friend of mine, he came and blessed our house in the Lenape Way when we moved into the area, and a hawk landed on the tree and stayed there the whole ceremony, watching.
Right.
And then I don't know if it's the same hawk, but just before this trip, I was drinking cacao on my porch, and 2 hawks came and sat on trees looking down on me while I'm sitting there, and I was just watching both of them.
Right.
And I kind of just asked, is there something you're trying to tell me or anything, just to see if that thoughts come into my head. But, just in awe of that, because those are things I wouldn't have noticed.
In Silicon Valley.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
25 years ago, hawks, I don't see them.
Yeah,
right?
But they were probably there.
I'm sure they were there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess it's just quite magical. And I'm just bringing that up because someone might be thinking, how do I do that? And I think it comes back to what you said with your beadwork. You just have to pick a time to start and just go do it.
Well, and use that word magical.
Yeah.
There is magic in the world.
Yes.
We just have to be present to experience that. And I've been criticized from using that word magic, but I still believe in magic.
Yeah.
I don't care. You can criticize me for using it, but I think that life can be magical, and it is.
Right.
And let's go that way. Let's go down that road.
I just think it's a miracle. You're sitting there, I'm sitting here, and all the things inside of our body that make it work, the heart, all that stuff. You can't say that that's a miracle. And then I would go even further, like, people, we use this word magical or spirit, right? It's unseen, but we know it's there. And I always tell people in the recent times, well, just think of the radio. You can't see the radio in the air, but when you tune that radio station in, it comes through your radio, right? Or your cell phone, someone's calling you, there's no wires, and that comes through. That is all in similar fashion. And what you're saying, to go outside, you're letting yourself tune in to the spirit that's already there, just like a radio wave. Exactly. How I would say it.
Yeah. Just tune it in.
Yes.
It's right there. It's there for you to experience. It's a gift for you.
Yeah. And like you said at the beginning of this talk, the rocks have information, the trees have information, and whether you feel that coming through for you or not, just sit there long enough. And it's a journey. It takes, maybe you have to start with 5 minutes and you do it every day, but then it'll grow on you, as it did with me. It took me a long time to be able to sit still.
Yeah,
just really, because you're so used to, oh, what am I doing?
Right.
And I'll just say one last thing on this is that I once was with a meditation teacher, and they said, Steve, you just have to be. And I said, great, how do you do that? And they laughed at me because I'm like, dude, they're like, no, you're not even understanding yet. Just be, son, just be.
Right, be.
Yeah.
Just be. Right.
Just be. And so you have to not be scared. I think some people get scared. I once had 20 acres and I had people come to the house, and this guy from the city said, how do you live like this so quiet? I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm actually scared.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I've experienced that. But people are uncomfortable being silent.
Yeah.
We're attuned, we're sort of conditioned to be stimulated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff coming at us all the time. And you get into that zone, and but really it's simple. You just have to go outside.
Yes. Because there's so much information there. And calming your mind. I was in Barcelona, and there's a man named Gaudí. I'm sure you heard, the famous architect. And we were walking through one of the buildings, and my wife loves architecture. And I was like, this guy was switched on. He must have been in prayer and spirit somehow. And then right then the tour guide said, he would go and pray for an hour a day 3 times. And I was like, see, there it is. It's that solitude. You'll actually get wisdom downloaded. I know we could talk about this for hours, and I'm sure I'm definitely going to want to entertain another time to be with you. I'm curious if there's anything we did not say, what would be if there's one other wisdom that we can take from the Lenape people to bring to now that would help us in ourselves or in our community? What wisdom do you think you'd want people to hear?
There's a law. I call these laws that I think is important, and we need to remind ourselves and one another of, is that we each have unique gifts, and we bring those to the life experience. The other is we all have the ability to heal. What else do you need?
Yeah, it is, because that's another thing that's been disempowered, that we need some other person to heal.
Right.
Takes our power away. And I know I said we were going to wrap up, but you just triggered something. I want to do one last thought before we finish this interview today. Michael Pace brought this up as well. You look at depression in our society. I find that that's because people aren't listening to their heart. They're not listening to the truth of what their specific talent, or whatever word we want to use, that comes into this being. And what Michael told me is that, the elders of the tribe would watch the children and see what they were good at naturally.
Yes.
And help them gravitate towards that.
Right.
And then you would live a fulfilled, happy life, instead of what I feel like today in society. It's like, oh, go do this and you'll make good money. You'll be able to have a house. You'll be able to pay your bills. And then they're miserable, and depression just keeps growing.
Right.
So is this what you mean by that innate thing inside of
We
you?
all have unique gifts, and it's our responsibility to nurture those gifts and to share those gifts, because that's uniquely who we are. We each are unique, and we bring such strength and beauty to the world when we follow our gift.
And that comes back to the word feelings. I think we're taught not to feel anymore, and the feeling inside of you that you want to do beadwork or that you want to paint, that is a feeling, and then we suffocate that feeling.
Right. Well, it's a capitalist society, right? We're being groomed to be productive and money makers, right?
Right.
To be successes, to be number one, to be top of the game.
Right.
And it's all pretty empty.
Yeah. Instead of being together, and
Right.
being able to do your unique expression. But something interesting is happening in society today. As I've been talking to people and I teach them to follow their feelings, they actually prosper. So I think spirit is bringing money into the hands of the people doing the right thing, and I've seen with my own eyes. And that's that blend. How do we move towards what we're talking about while we still live in this system? But I found if you listen to your heart, then it's a lot easier to get up every day and live. And
I think if you follow your own truth, things come to you.
Yeah.
It's a better way of being.
Yeah. I appreciate you so much, Joe. Thank you for taking the time to be with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the conversation. And thank you for the cacao.
Yes. And thank you for listening or watching, however you're doing this. We take our show really serious, and we want you to have more business and more life. We want you to live a better life, like we talked about with Joe today. And so we're also, if you're not on our newsletter, we actually listen to everything you say. So when you hit reply, we read those. So please tell us, what was your biggest takeaway from today? And what would you like to hear more? If I do get the opportunity to have another interview with Joe Baker. And please put that in there. And if you're not a member of our newsletter, all you have to do is text WOW, W-O-W, like a wildlife, to 72,000. So 7200072000, and then it'll prompt you to join our newsletter. Until next time, remember, choose gratitude and create freedom.